The Birchie Kid joining us as always. What's up, my man?
Hey, how's it going, boys?
What's
Happy
up?
Friday.
How are you?
Oh, I'm treated to Stony this week.
That's right. Yes, exactly.
You never know what to expect, Birchie.
I'm looking forward to it. Let's go.
All right. So injury news, let's start there. Graham Glasgow, that didn't sound great. And if he doesn't go, who starts at center?
Yeah, so Graham Glasgow did not practice yesterday. He wasn't out there today when we just got back from practice, so that'll likely be 2 straight missed practices for him. That doesn't bode well, obviously, for his chances of playing on Sunday. It sounds like, judging by Dan Campbell's comments this morning, that Tristan Colon would be first in line at center. So despite the possible return of Christian Mahogany at left guard, you probably haven't seen the last of Tristan Colon just yet. They've also worked Nice in there and Kingsley in there, but I think right now they probably have Colon as the number 1 backup center. Also no Kirby Joseph today, really not a surprise. I know I said it last week, I'll say it again. I'd be shocked, honestly, at this point if he plays again this season. No Taylor Decker today, although like last week when he sat out all 3 practices, I do expect him to play on Sunday.
Will we see the safety that they signed a couple of weeks ago, the Casey?
Casey, yeah.
No, I don't think so. I mean, he's still down there on the practice squad. They're going to roll, hopefully, with getting Thomas Harper back this week. They like the way that Avonte Maddox has played. There's a few other guys that are still ahead of KZ on the depth chart.
What happened with Hallett? Him losing him, is that something they didn't expect, or were they cool with it?
I mean, the Titans put the claim in, and off how it went. It's kind of crazy. I was here Monday afternoon for Dan Campbell's press conference, and before driving into our station to do Lions review, I ended up holding the door open for the Lions equipment manager, who was walking through the media room with a giant moving box in his arms. And it turns out those were Eric Hallett's pads that were being shipped to Tennessee. So that all happened very quickly. He didn't do himself any favors with the way he played last week. I'll point to one play in particular where he bounced off Blake Corum when he had a free shot at him on 4th and 1 in the second half and could have dropped him for a loss. And instead, Corum worked his way to a first down, one of many lowlights for the Lions defense last week. But, missed tackles like that on this team are a pretty easy way to find yourself somewhere else.
Do you get any sense from the players, obviously not from Dan, that there's any concern about them not making the playoffs?
I mean, no one's going to say we are concerned about not making
I
the
know,
playoffs.
but I didn't mean verbatim, but you can always tell a vibe.
No, I mean, obviously, urgency is high. Like they are well aware of the scenario they're facing and the climb that they have to mount. They know that they have to win 3 straight and get some help to get in. I think talking to some players, I hear almost some tones of 2022, the end of 2022, which were hopeful tones, optimistic tones. Like talking with Alex Anzalone this week, he's like, dude, we just got to get in. We got to get in. And I'll say what I think a lot of them are thinking, which is that after the Rams, who did lose last night, who's the best team in the NFC? Is it Seattle with Sam Darnold, who looked very Sam Darnold-like last night? Is it San Fran missing their 2 best defensive players and no number 1 receiver? Is it Green Bay missing Micah Parsons and Devontae Wyatt? Is it Chicago? It's not Tampa. It's not Carolina. Is it Philly, who nearly lost to the Lions at home a month ago? Is it the Lions? It might be. It might be any one of those 6 or 7 teams. And if the Lions can get in, you would assume that they would have gotten in, winning 3 straight games and probably fixing some of the woes that have befallen their defense. And if that's the case, they would enter the playoffs riding a wave of momentum. And then you start to think, well, hey, if the matchups and the seeding fall in their favor, they have as good a chance as maybe any team in that NFC field to potentially make some noise. So obviously the focus now is we got to beat Pittsburgh, but they also know that if they can find a way in, maybe they can do some damage.
I think the best team right now is maybe San Francisco, because they might be getting the healthiest.
Yeah, they might be, but they're also still missing their two best defensive players, and there's no word that Warner's going to be back or Bosa's going to be back, and their leading receiver is a running back. Like, it's just a way of saying, Stoney, like every single team, even the Rams now, are clearly flawed, and the Lions are among them, which doesn't make them any different than anyone else in the NFC.
Well, look, I like this matchup because I think Pittsburgh, where they're shorthanded this week, is actually great for Detroit. They're shorthanded protecting the quarterback with the left tackle, being their fourth guy there, and they're shorthanded rushing the quarterback with T.J. Watt and maybe Herbig out.
Yeah, I think this matchup on Sunday really suits the Lions and potentially sets the stage for them to kind of get back to who they are and rediscover their own identity. They were clearly bullied. They were manhandled last week, and I do want to get into that here in a moment, especially regarding Kelvin Shepard's comments about the run defense. But this is a much different Steelers team that is vulnerable right now in the trenches, and that presents an opportunity for the Lions to reassert themselves physically and reimpose their dominance. And I really do think they should do that. It was jarring last week watching what I think we consider the strength of this team, the interior of the defensive line, get blown off the ball. That should not be an issue on Sunday. The Steelers could be missing as many as 3 starters on the offensive line, including, as you referenced, the left tackle, but also 2 guys on the interior, a guard and a center. And that unit, even when healthy this year, has produced the second fewest yards before contact on the ground. So they really have not generated any kind of push up front, and the Lions should be able to take advantage of that. And, yeah, then on the offensive side, this is a game where you should feel pretty good about being able to drop back and pass, but also run the ball down this defense's throat. So I think it sets up well here for the Lions on Sunday.
You wrote a really nice column about Aleem McNeil and the struggles he's had and how he's taken it. Should we expect a different Aleem McNeil this week than we saw last week where he didn't show up on the stat sheet?
Yeah, and you have to, and they better get it, because if they don't, then you start to question again what the ceiling might be for this defense and this team. I mean, that he has to be your best player on the middle, and I think one way of looking at it is, like, while Roy Lopez is a good player and has been even a great player at times this year, he cannot, for this team to reach its ceiling, be the best player among the quartet of himself, Aleem McNeil, Tyreek Williams, and DJ Reader. And I think too often recently, certainly last Sunday, that has been the case. So Aleem has to be better, DJ Reader has to be better, and Tyreek Williams and his opportunities has to be better. But yeah, Aleem said, he acknowledged he has not played up to his standards so far. He felt like, in a lot of games this year, he's been trying to process too many things before the snap, try and diagnose the formations and the alignments, almost like a linebacker sometimes, instead of just playing defensive tackle and beating his block and destroying his block. And he feels like that's kind of slowed him down in some of his rushes. He said in his 2 most productive games, his first one back from injury against Tampa, where he was almost unstoppable, and then Thanksgiving against the Packers, he was just cutting it loose. And in those 2 games, 12 combined quarterback pressures. In his other 6 games this season, just 11. It's in those games where he feels like he's been limiting himself almost mentally. So he said his knee feels fine, no lingering effects there, but he does need to find the version of himself that we saw against Tampa and against Green Bay.
Defensively, if you look at the trying to slow down the Steelers' offense, we talked about protecting Aaron Rodgers. I just feel like you gang up on DK Metcalf. You take your chances at Thielen and MVS. MVS has the same amount of receptions the last 2 weeks as Aaron Rodgers himself has. And then just worry about Freiermuth, Washington, and Gainwell with the short stuff. I don't know. I guess I look at the last 2 offenses the Lions played, and I think, well, here's an example of an offense that isn't as difficult to defend. Now you got to show up and play, but I like the matchup for Detroit.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's part of what is fueling some belief that the Lions can make a run here. I think they are through the hardest part of their schedule, and they are entering the cushiest part of their schedule. And I know the defense, justifiably so, is receiving a lot of flack right now, but they just ran kind of a gauntlet of offenses, certainly in quarterbacks with Jordan Love and Dak Prescott and Stafford and those passing weapons on the outside. And you size up what's in front of them this week and then next week, and you get the sense that they should be able to bounce back pretty quickly. I think Darnell Washington is kind of a fascinating subplot of this game on Sunday. I mean, he's unlike any tight end that really any of us have ever seen. I was asking Dan about that today, Dan Campbell, and he was like, yeah, I mean, certainly no one these days, maybe back in my day, you would see a 6'7", 285-pound tight end, but no one that is around the league anymore. So, he said maybe we could put Penei Sewell back in pads and have him run a few guys over this week to try and simulate the look we're going to get from Darnell Washington. But on the whole, it's a pretty uninspiring cast of weapons for the Steelers, and one that honestly should not give the Lions defense all that much trouble.
You wrote, and I'm not just saying this because you're here with us, you wrote some really great stuff this week. And I want to ask you about, you mentioned Anzalone, and you reflected that this could be his last home game as a Detroit Lion. How much has he thought about that?
Yeah, thank you, Stoney. I appreciate that. He has thought about it. And when I asked him that very question, I thought he was going to tell me, oh, no, I'm just focused on the game ahead of me. But he was honest and said, yeah, it's something that we've talked about, that I've talked about with my wife and our son Cooper, who I believe is 4, turning 5 in a few months. This could be the end of an era for Anzalone here. He considers himself a Detroit Lion, and there's a chance that his 40th home game at Ford Field is indeed his last. And, they're putting such significance into it that Cooper, who usually can't attend those 4:25 kicks because they end too late, will be at the game on Sunday. Mom and Dad are making an exception for him in that regard, and obviously Anzalone's wife, Lindsay, will be there with him, and he's pondered that possibility and also made it clear that he's still hopeful to return. He has expressed that to Brad Holmes. Obviously, they weren't seeing eye to eye on a potential extension back in training camp, but Anzalone remains hopeful that maybe they can work something out this offseason. But if it is indeed his final home game with the Lions, I think it's worth reflecting on his legacy. This is a guy last year who returned 6 weeks, I believe, after breaking his forearm with a metal plate inserted into that arm to play what he called a legacy game against the Vikings in the season finale, and ended up playing every snap but one that day, led the team in tackles, shut down T.J. Hawkinson, and helped the Lions win that NFC North clinching game over Minnesota. And when I asked him that night what he wanted his legacy to be, because he had brought it up, he said he wasn't quite sure yet. And I asked him that again on Wednesday. What do you want your legacy to be here with the Lions? And he said, my dad always told me growing up that make sure you leave a place better than you found it. And I like to think that I've done that here. I've added some stability that they were lacking formerly in the linebackers room. And early on especially, and these are my words, not his, he guided this team through a lot of storms. And, look, he's got one more chance to do that, over these final 3 games, try and get this defense right.
Bertie, when can we see you on TV next?
You can see me on Sunday morning, Lions Game Day Live, and Sunday night, I believe. And I might have to call back in a little bit to talk about Kelvin Shepherd's comments on the run game.
Sorry.
Those are still stuck in my craw.
Yeah, we're short on time. Sorry, man.
That's right. I'll call back in 10 minutes.
It's the Berchie Kid from Allen Park. Joins us every Friday here on 97.1.